name is Anand, and I'm currently playing the role of an agile coach in Philips. Uh, I own the company Agile Spirit Private Limited, and I'm also a partner for a consulting company in Netherlands called Blinkline Consulting. And today's topic is the science of systems thinking. Uh, I have been highly influenced by these three gentlemen, the works of these three gentlemen, Dr. Russell Lakoff, Peter Drucker, and lately Peter Senge has been doing a lot of research on systems thinking. I hear a lot of background noise, so I'm not sure. Okay, okay. So, what is systems thinking? Systems thinking is a concept where we try to see the whole system in one view and then try to solve the problem from a system point of view. Unfortunately, we don't really understand how to do this. All we have done is we've broken the system into small pieces and then tried to solve each problem, hoping that the overall problem will be solved. The picture here depicts what a system is. A system is an made up of lot of small components, and the most important part is the communication between these components. So how do we understand system thinking today? This is exactly how we understand systems thinking today. Some of us sit on the other side of the boat and are very glad that the water is not coming on their side, without realizing that the boat is one system. If not today, the water will come within a few minutes to the other side and the whole boat is going into the water. So let's get into the fundamental aspect of defining what a system is. A car is a system. So a system as a whole is made up of more than two parts. None of them have an independent effect on the whole. Human body, if there is a small headache, it's not going to have a huge effect on the whole human body. We still continue to function the same with a small irritation in the head. The parts of the system are interconnected. Every part in this human body is interconnected. Either it can be direct or it can be indirect. Combining parts of these human bodies creates subsystem, and the behaviors of these subsystem has an impact on the behavior of the whole. So what do we understand from these? System as a whole cannot be divided into individual parts. Individual parts outside the context of the system makes no sense. A heart outside the human body is of a waste organ, but within the human body, it's essential for this system to survive. Similarly, we have an ability to write, and if you cut the hand, put it on the table and ask the hand to write, it cannot write on its own. There has to be connections across the brain to the parts of the hand, and then only when the whole system can understand each other properly, we'll be able to achieve function. So the essential property of the system is derived by its interconnections of the parts and not how they behave individually. So the defining properties of any system as a whole, it's not its individual parts. The whole system defines the property of the entire system. So what is a fundamental problem, right? The fundamental problem is we need to understand that again, a human body is an organism with life only if the interconnections are working efficiently. How often we have heard of people dying of multi-organ failure? What does that mean? It means that organ as a whole could have worked properly, but because the connectivity between the organs have failed, the system has failed. Look at the clock. The clock can function only if the interconnecting parts communicate with each other. Otherwise, the clock will not work. Similarly, look at the train. A whole train can take passengers from one place to another, but not a single part of the train can actually take passengers. If you look at the train closely, there are three systems here. One, the train itself is a system. Second, the track is a system. And then when the train moves on the track, there is one more communication system at the station who will communicate and regulate the flow of the trains. If one of the communication between these three systems collapses, the train is going to derail. So essentially, what is that we can understand? A system cannot be broken into smaller parts. It has to be viewed as a whole, and its efficiency is not the sum of the parts, but a product of its interaction as a whole. What we have done is we have taken a big elephant, broken up into two pieces and expecting it to have a two small elephants. Unfortunately, we end up with a mess if we try to do that, right? So the belief of divide and conquer is really not a great idea. Well, we have learned, we have always done this, but I think it's time to reflect and see, is there any other way of trying to do this? So in order to understand the system, you need to understand a few fundamentals. So the statement goes like this: an ounce of information is worth a pound of data. An ounce of knowledge is worth a pound of information. An ounce of understanding is worth a pound of knowledge. And an ounce of wisdom is worth a pound of understanding. Data is like bauxite or iron ore. It's just mud. You really cannot make out anything from the data. Information is what you pull out from the data, and you need to pull out the information what you need. That is, ability to convert that mud, remove the iron ore from it, is what is information. Knowledge is how do we actually do it efficiently, is the knowledge that we have. And understanding is how do you convert this iron into something meaningful, and wisdom is how do you actually use it the right way. So many a times we try to teach people about the knowledge. Unfortunately, we do not have knowledge at all, and we try to teach what we don't have. So data, information, knowledge, and understanding focuses on efficiency, that is doing the right things. Sorry, doing things right. Whereas wisdom focuses on effectiveness, that is doing the right things. So it is the wisdom that differentiates efficiency over effectiveness. So when you're really thinking about the system, you need to understand how data, information, knowledge, understanding, and wisdom are connected to each other, and focus on the wisdom, not focus on data. So what does that mean? What's the dilemma we are in today? Now, let's assume we fall sick, we go to the doctor gives us medicine, we come back. We are likely to fall sick again. We again go back to the doctor, come back for the same problem. For the same, how often have we gone to the doctor for repeated fevers? How often we've gone to doctor for severe cold? It's the same thing that comes again and again. So essentially, it's not a healthcare industry. It's a sick and disabled care system, not a healthcare system. The idea here is if the doctors can treat patients in such a way that the problem is solved, then their industry will come to an end. So it doesn't work that way. The focus is on maintenance of sickness and disability. So prevention is better than cure is the mantra that they follow, but at what cost? Right? Look at the second picture here. This is what I call as the air conditioner's dilemma. When I was a young boy in Bangalore, the maximum temperature was 18 degrees. Today in summer, this summer in 2007, the maximum temperature in Bangalore was 38 degrees. In fact, the temperature has just doubled. Now, in order to address this problem, we don't address this problem in a systematic way, we address it in a symptomatic way. What we do, we install air conditioners. What is happening with the installation of air conditioners? Hot air is again pumped to the atmosphere, which will increase the heat of the atmosphere. So we are actually not solving problem. We are creating a new problem for the coming days. Right? Should we solve this problem in a systematic way? If you think at the system perspective, one of the way to solve problem is grow more trees. Don't cut down trees. Increase this water level. Water surface water levels have to go up. Only if you can do that systematically, the whole atmosphere around the city comes down. By pumping hot air, we are creating a new problem. We are not solving problem systematically. So how do you teach the science of system thinking to students, to professionals? Teaching is not about imparting knowledge. It is about inspiring students to learn. Predominantly, when I say teaching, we get into a classroom mode, and there is a teacher who teaches or imparts knowledge onto the students. Unfortunately, teaching is not a good idea. Well, teaching is sometimes great idea, but being taught hinders learning. When I say being taught, it means to say that you give everything ready made to the student. All the student has to do is open the box and start eating the food. They are not learning anything. They're just becoming a mechanical order taking teams. And that's what we have in industry today. So the simple logic is teaching is an obstruction for learning. We do not really enjoy classroom trainings. How often have you seen in trainings when you give a break, people will just get up and just walk away from the room? And haven't you seen movies where the moment the school bell rings, the kids just run out of the school shouting? It looks like they are kind of domesticated animal teaching. So the problem with teaching is not giving us an ability to learn. So how should we teach then? There are two factors that are critically important for growth of intellectual growth and wisdom. They are your capacity to learn new skills and the motivation to learn. If you can enable these two, then automatically people will start learning, and these kind of learnings create a system thinking point of view. Let me give you three case studies because we really do not have much time. I'm going to give you three case studies here where how we have solved problem in a systematic way, right? For first case study one is solving human problems. So this is the problem statement. Dr. Russell Ackoff, who is kind of my inspiration to learn systems thinking, was a dean in the University of Philadelphia. And once what happened was a small locality, uh, there was a school in a small locality, and the teachers of this school came to Dr. Russell Ackoff and told him that they have a problem. The problem is none of the school students who pass out of the school actually are able to read anything. This was a city in the United States where there was 100% black population. And in the 1960s, it was at the rock bottom in the schools. So what did Dr. Russell Ackoff do? Dr. Russell Ackoff asked the teachers to go to the HRD department of the United States government and ask if they can solve the problem. They said that they've already done it. The HRD department came, they did some observations and absolutely no change. Because what they did was a symptomatic treatment. But this problem requires a systematic treatment. What happened here was Russell Ackoff and his staff went to every student's house and made some observations. After they collated the observations, this was the summary of the observations. They realized that 65% of the students did not have a book at home, and they never had seen parents read. Parents do not know how to read, so they've never seen anybody reading in their house. And at the age of 12, there is this group rivalry that starts. So kids cannot go to school alone; they have to go with groups. And and within groups, if you study, it was considered as a bad thing. And there was this white skinned blonde lady who used to come and ask students to read, to study. So they felt that the concept of reading was a whitish thing. Blacks must not study. So they did something in the semester, beginning of the semester, and there was dramatic results at the end of the semester, at the end of 6 months. At the end of 6 months, all the students knew how to read. They were a mastery in reading. The city had received 17 national awards. The city had given interview in 7 major newspaper television programs, and leadership has received all kinds of awards in the school. So what was that magic that they did to make this kind of a change, right? So they solved the problem from a system point of view. They realized that pushing students to read is not a problem that will not create them. So they realized that they need to create an environment where there is a desire to learn, and you need to enable students to learn, and it has to come through self motivation. The environment should be created in such a way that there is a self motivation to learn. They thought a lot about how to solve the problem, and finally came up with a crazy idea. The
Mobile
crazy idea
phone.
was this. So it was Charlie Chaplin movies were played without voice. It was on mute. And if students really wanted to understand, they had to start reading the subtitles. And any student could go and watch the movie. No need to take permission from any teacher. They could just get up and go to the place where the film was beamed, and they could see it. And in order to enjoy, the students realized that the only way was to read the subtitles. Now, do you realize that there is an environment where there is desire to learn? Students are enabled to learn, and now there is a self motivation to learn. A simple change in the behavior of the environment changed the whole system. There was no marks, there was no
Barna.
awards, there was no rewards. I hear some background noise. If people are just talking, can you please put yourself on mute? Let's talk about case two. handling environmental problems. Right, there was an island called as island of Borneo in Southeast Asia, where the island inmates suddenly found that people were suffering from, there was an outburst of malaria in that particular island. So they called the World Health Organization, and the World Health Organization had a simple solution to solve the problem. They came with and they pumped copious amounts of DDT across the entire island. Yes, naturally, all the mosquitoes died and the malaria came under control. But it had some interesting side effects after a few days. When the DDT was sprayed, along with mosquitoes, to the leftmost corner, you have some insects called moth here. These moths also died. Now, these moths were feeding on caterpillars. Without these moths, the caterpillars started multiplying very rapidly. And within a few weeks suddenly saw that the inmates saw that their roof started falling down because the caterpillars were eating the roof. The roof was made out of material which the caterpillars used to eat, and suddenly they had a problem with roofs falling down. They also found some more additional side effects of the whole solution. There were some lizards called as geckos. Now, gecko is a kind of a lizard where the metabolism is so high that it can retain these poison for a longer duration of time. So when geckos started eating insects that were affected with DDT, they did not die. But the cats which lived on the geckos started eating geckos and immediately died. With the cats gone, the rats went up. So there was an enormous amount of loss in food grain, and slowly plague started there. So one small problem of killing mosquitoes has created so many side effects. So a problem is simple, solution is simple. If you do not realize the entire system as a solution, you end up creating more problems than what they had. Now again, the World Health Organization received a call from the same island, but this time it was not of malaria, but it was rats and plague. Now what did they do to solve the problem? They did not come and kill the rats. Instead, they created something called as Operation Cat Drop. Cats from Southeast Asia, Asia, and Europe were picked up and they were dropped in this island. Some cats definitely died after eating geckos, but some cats started controlling the movement of, controlling the growth of rats by eating the rats. Essentially, the problem situation came under control. So most of the times, if you do not realize the system, we end up creating more problems than we actually have created it. Right? Let's take case 3, dealing with wicked problems. This is the case of medical industry, and I've picked up from a TED talk from a guy called Atul Gawande, who is a surgeon in US and a reporter after his work in the evenings. So around 1937, medicines were very cheap and ineffective. If patient was in the hospital, it offered food, shelter, warmth, caring attention of the nurse. Doctors and medicines made no effect. Why? Because there was not much known diseases at that point in time. Doctors did not know. There were only a few known diseases like pneumonia, excessive bleeding, and early signs of paralysis. Again, early signs of paralysis only if there is a good interaction between the doctor and the patient. That's the agile manifesto number 1, individual and interactions over process and tools. There were no treatment for all diseases. The life of a doctor was like a life of a craftsman. The doctors used to come every day, find a new problem, start treating the patient with whatever they know. They did not get, they used to draw blood from the patient, they used to give medicines to the patient. It was literally, there was one doctor and one nurse who used to take care of the entire set of patients. And doctors had to learn by doing a lot of experiments. And sometimes most of the times experiments would fail, but sometimes when experiments were success, they used to make records out of it, and then that means they found a solution to a problem. So independent, self-sufficiency, and autonomy was the highest value at that point of time for doctors. Let's see what is the case today. What is today's challenge? Today's challenge is we have treatments for close to thousands of conditions today. 4,000 medical and surgical procedures are there today. 6,000 drugs can be licensed to prescribe. In those days, there was only a doctor and a nurse, but today it takes 15 full-time clinicians to take care of patients. Why? They're all specialists. We have broken the entire human body into small parts and created specialists. Now, you have a specialist for heart, you have a specialist for lung, you have a specialist for brain, you have a specialist for kidney, specialist for skin. So we've broken up the human body into small parts and created specialists across everywhere. And these doctors and clinicians are trained and rewarded to be cowboys, not pit crews. What do you mean by that? 40% of coronary artery diseases receive incomplete care even today. 60% of asthma and stroke patients receive incomplete care. And the amazing thing is, around 2 million patients every day come to hospital and catch a disease with new infections which they didn't have. Why? It is because somebody in the hospital did not follow a small medical procedure. That's the problem. We do not follow the process. We spend enormous amount of time in creating process, but we don't follow the process. And unmanageable cost. 40,000 US dollars is charged in a hospital in the US today to do a hip or a knee replacement. That can definitely give life to people. But is this the best treatment we have? Don't we have any other treatments which are less expensive? Often the best care are the ones that are least expensive. For example, if you go to Ayurveda for a massage, I've seen many knee problems getting solved rather than a knee replacement, right? So what happened? How did we kind of solve these kind of problems? So the doctors applied something called systems thinking. We have the best drugs, we have the best technology, we have the best results, the best specialists, but we do not have the best results. This is very much analogous to having a huge garage where you get all cars from different companies, get specialized automobile engineers, ask them to find which is the best engine, ask them to find which is the best transmission, which is the best gear system, which is the best interior, and then get all the best parts and try to assemble a car. You will never get a car, because though individual components are the best, they don't know how to talk with each other. So they started applying these concepts to solve a problem called as deaths during surgery. There was enormous amount of death during surgeries. So they asked themselves, is there any other industry, high risk industry in this world? And they found two industries. One was an aviation industry, one was a skyscraper industry. They started comparing the medical industry to this and found that the aviation industry has done a wonderful job in terms of managing the entire system. The flights do not crash as often as patients die in the hospital. So they called a lead Boeing engineer and asked them, how do they do that? And the shock of their life, they found that they had to use a checklist. A simple checklist can solve a lot of problems. And what is this? They created something called pause points. What are these pause points? These are points where the value flows within the system. Like before anesthesia, before skin incision, before patient leaves the operation theater, they created checklists. These checklists were as simple as 10 to 16 items. And this created a huge change. Effectively following the checklist, the complication rates fell by 35% and the death rates fell by 47%. What was this magic it all happened about? The checklist defined how the whole system should behave, not individual system should behave. The checklist had clear items that what should be the condition of the patient as a whole before coming in, what should be the condition of the patient during the incision, what should be the condition of the patient as a whole when they move out of OT to the regular wards. And they followed these checklists religiously, and eventually they found deaths fell by 35%. It's not just in the United States, it's been followed. This experiment was done in multiple countries. About 12 to 13 hospitals were identified, including India, to see and observe, and results were consistently in the positive direction. So the 3 points of approach is: identify failures, that means get reasonable data, understand what the data means, get the right information from the data, think of options systematically, and finally implement the approach as a system. Every hospital member was trained to understand the checklist. Every hospital member was hand-holded to fill up the checklist. And even if a small change in the checklist, an alarm was being raised. And this helped to solve a lot of problems. So in order to understand systems thinking and work at a system level, you need to learn new skills. One is teamwork, humility, and more than anything, it is discipline. It is the opposite of autonomy and self-sufficiency, what the doctors wanted back in 1937. They do not want the medicines work now. Medicines will not work. It is the system in which the medicine is given makes the big difference. And complexity needs group success, because every problem what we have solved in the last few years actually have come up with as a bigger problem now. So the complexity has risen like anything, and we need to understand how we can deal it with a group success. These are the exact points what agile way of working talks. It talks about teamwork, it talks about humility to customer, it talks about discipline, it talks about self-sufficiency. Though it is an opposite of autonomy here, agile still says that the team should have an autonomy, but at a system level, if everybody starts having their own autonomy, it doesn't work. So we need to control the autonomy, and we need to build a system that works, not individual component. Today the way we solve problems is again divide and conquer, right? We split problems into sections based on our perception. I'll give you two examples here. In 1900, there were only 5 subjects in engineering: physics, chemistry, biology, psychology, and sociology. Today, in 2010, there are 450 disciplines. What we have created is we have just created a filing system of knowledge, right? When Newton created the gravitation, there was only one. It was called as it was called as the natural science. It was not even called physics at that point in time. And look at the law of gravitation. You apply it in physics, you apply it in mathematics, you apply it in geography, you apply it in every part of it. That means to say that when Newton did, it was a system. But after Newton gave his gravitational theory, we broke up the subjects into multiple parts, but we never are seeing the whole system as a one piece. Not only science, our interpretations have also become the same thing. I'll give you a small story here. So what's happened is, uh, what has happened is, there was a lady who died of heart attack, and this lady was an old woman. She died of heart attack while climbing the third floor. And Dr. Russell Lakoff and his HODs were all sitting in the room when the news they heard about the lady's death. Immediately, the Department of Community Medicine said that it is the problem with doctors because we do not have adequate doctors in the system. The Department of Economics said that it is wrong. We have enough doctors, but doctors do not come because if they go to private hospitals, they get more money. And Department of Social Welfare said that unfortunately, none of them know the real picture. The real picture is this lady's son is a huge lawyer who has a huge mansion in the outskirts of the city. But if but the social behavior of people in the United States is they don't live with their parents. If this lady had lived with her parents, she would have lived happily for a few more years. What is this problem? Is it a medical problem? Is it an economics problem? Or is it a social problem? We even interpret problem solving in the same way. So how should we solve problems today? We should not solve problems. We should actually dissolve problems. I'll give you two simple examples of this. There was a building in 1990. There was a building in New York City which was built during the Second World War, a 14-storied building. People used to take almost 180 seconds to travel from the ground floor to the first floor, or uh, the total time taken, the waiting time and the traveling time is about 180 seconds. All the officers made this a huge cry, and a group of engineers came to understand the problem. They took $1 million, ran away with a project report. The project report said that if you add additional lifts, the break-even point, because it consumes some office space, the break-even point is 15 years, which is business, not a business viable solution. You should modernize your lifts, which is again not a solution because technically it's not feasible to modernize those old-fashioned lifts. The third option was install new lifts, which is computer operated, which can have artificial intelligence. But the problem is not that. The problem will not solve. So the owner of this hospital of this building called everybody into a room to do something called a brainstorming. A psychology professor who was a HR department of one organization there said that he has a simple problem. They solved the problem in 1 week. They spent only $500. The problem was dissolved forever. All he said was, why are people getting pissed off for 180 seconds? Because they're not engaged. Why don't you engage people in those 180 seconds? All they did was they installed mirrors across the ground floor lobby. And people asked, how does it solve the problem? They said the women would go and start doing their makeup, and the men would start staring at them. Or the men would imagine that how beautiful it would be for me to go with the date with that lady. Now they're all engaged. The 180 second just goes off as it is. Since that day till today, you go to any hotel, you see the ground floor lobby, you find mirrors. This is the reason. There's one more small solution, one more small example of problem dissolving. If you see this picture, the second picture from the top, this is called as the matchbook, not the matchbox. In 1930s, this is the kind of matchboxes that were being published by a company called as the Blue Tip Company. Now, there was a fundamental problem in the design. When the black portion, the black perforation at the bottom is the one where you actually rub the matchstick. When you rub the matchstick, accidentally the fire would go jump onto the other sticks, and other sticks would catch fire, injuring the hand of people. So they were wondering. Lot of cases was filed against this company. So a young man walked into the office and told that he would like to meet the CEO of the Blue Tip Company, and he said that he would dissolve the problem forever. He charged $42,000 in those days, and all he did was ask them to put this perforation behind. He did not solve the problem. He dissolved this problem forever. And that's how we need to solve problems today. So the art of problem dissolving is an art of solving problems within the context of the system with no new issues. This is what we should learn, how to solve problems. The way we solve problems, we should not give rise to new problems. And that's the end of the quick presentation. I think it's about 21:35 now. We still have 5 more minutes. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take. Yeah, go ahead, please. I can hear somebody talking.
If can you give some examples of system thinking or the way issues are handled in IT from the perspective of system thinking, what goes wrong, and maybe system thinking is the one to look at.
Simple example is the way how we start trying to build efficiency in the system. Right? We want to build, we want to reduce the time to market. So the way we think is automation. Most of the organizations run behind automation. If they believe that if you do automation, the problems will get resolved. But end of the day, if you see the whole value stream mapping, automation is a small portion of it. That's it. The whole system has to change right from the time the requirement come to the right from the time we actually push the code to production. The entire system has to be managed, and many a times we really have to wait for a lot of things to get done, but we don't focus on that. We just focus on small portions here and there, and actually we do not solve problems. In fact, we give rise to more problems and create a lot of issues. This is one example I can think as of now, right now.
Thanks.
Okay, any other question? Okay, if there are no further questions, then I would like to thank you for your time. This is my contact number and my email. So if anybody needs any update or if you want to discuss with me, feel free to contact me and we can have a discussion around this. I'll also put this in SlideShare and send out a link to everybody in the meeting invite, so everybody can get it.
Thanks, Anand.
Okay. If there are no
Thanks.
further questions, thank you very much for your time and all the best, guys.